Okay, so I guess kind of first things first. I guess the obvious place to start is where did you kind of get introduced to music? Like, how did this all kind of begin for you?
Oh, I came from a very musical family.
Okay.
And my grandfather, on my dad's side, taught music his whole life out of his house. He taught piano, voice, organ, and theory. And he also was the church organist at James Street Baptist Church, downtown Hamilton, for over 60 years. So as a young lad, I got taken around to see a lot of his concerts. He was a concert pianist as well as an organist, so he would give recitals on the organ and the piano. So he was my very first teacher, and I was about 7 years old when my father agreed to start driving me out to his house in Hamilton. So for a full hour lesson, and they would be on Monday nights. My dad would drive from Brampton all the way to Hamilton just so I could have an hour lesson.
True.
And that's what got the ball rolling for me in terms of getting exposure on the piano. But I didn't really take to the lessons very well, and I guess to be more specific, the practicing that had to go along with all of that.
Yeah.
And I think he lost his patience with me after, a year or so. But I learned enough that I discovered that I had a pretty decent ear. So by age 9 or 10, I was lifting my songs on my own from the radio, mostly playing like Elton John or Billy Joel songs. And then there wasn't really much elementary music experience for me. When it wasn't until I got to high school that things really started to get opened up for me, and I took music all 5 years that I was at high school, and I couldn't play the piano because somebody was already on there, so I switched to saxophone and fell in love with that. And so I played tenor saxophone for 5 years, still keeping up with my private piano playing. And when I was 16, I started taking private jazz piano lessons from a teacher in Toronto. And interestingly enough, my dad was also taking from the same guy. So it was a neat kind of a father and son bonding exercise. We would drive down together and have our lessons, and I just became more and more interested. And I knew during high school that I was going to be doing something with music, not necessarily teaching, but I knew I'd be doing something. And so I made up my mind I would take a year off and save my money. And I got accepted into the York University music program, and I graduated from there with a Bachelor of Fine Arts with a major in jazz piano performance. And I feel very lucky because I've been able to continue playing, doing it on the side, and it's been awesome. The other part of the inspiration from music, sorry if this answer is too long for you.
No.
My dad has always had a very, very strong interest in jazz. And as early as 10, 11 years old, he started to take me down to every major jazz club in Toronto. So I didn't know until I got older the value of those concerts because I now know who those artists are or were in some cases. But we went to Bourbon Street, Basin Street, George's Spaghetti House, and saw all the big names that were coming in. So as I like to tell them, it was probably the best jazz education a young person could ever ask for. So as I said, I feel very blessed that I was exposed to that because it inspired it in me, and I kind of overcame that resistance to practicing because I fell in love with jazz, and I like to practice jazz, right?
Yeah.
It's not like practicing a Bach or a Mozart piece, which I love to play, but it's a totally different skill set that you need to play classical music. And I also knew that what a fun way to be able to continue to enjoy music is to spread the joy of music to young people in high school, and what a neat career that might be to get excited about music and look to see if there's other future Jeff Daniels out there who might, be coming in here at 14 years old with a real hunger to learn. And I'm happy to say that continues to be a huge inspiration for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think the fact that the jazz really appealed to you, like, I know you said that you went to a bunch of jazz clubs around Toronto and such. Was that kind of what drew you to jazz, or was it?
It was that, and the fact that every Saturday morning there was a jazz radio show on what's now called Jazz FM, but back in the days it was operating out of Ryerson, and it was called CJRT, and they played jazz music from 6 to 12. like 6 a.m. to 12 noon, and every Saturday morning my dad had that on.
Oh, okay.
And so apart from that, he played vinyls and cassette tapes all the time in the house, and him and I would make cassette tapes together, and we would record tapes from the albums, and we started to share. Like I would buy some albums and share them with him, and so there was always a lot of music played in the house. So I think to answer your question more exactly, I was just exposed to so much of it just in the house. Even if we never went to any jazz clubs, I probably still would have developed an interest in jazz because it's just so much fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of that, I mean, I know you said your family is very musical and they all kind of teach music. Do you feel like if your family wasn't as musical, or grandfather never played piano, or your dad wasn't super interested in music, do you still feel like you would have pursued music? Like,
wow, that's a really good question. I don't really know. I mean,
I guess
I might have become one of those people that still really loves music, but always kind of convince myself I'm never really good enough to play. You know how there's just so many of those kind of people that are out there.
Yeah.
They're avid live music fans. They go and hear bands. They buy albums. They follow artists. But when you ask them, do you play? Oh no, God, I could never play. And they're like 30 years old or something, or 35. Got tons of time left. I might have become one of those people, but I think I got the luck of the draw. I was exposed to it so early, and my dad also had a piano. I don't know that all kids have that opportunity now. The piano, for me, it was there. I would be able to come in and be at the house by myself, say on a Saturday night, nobody there, and you turn off the lights and turn the light on over top of the piano, and I could just play for 2 hours and be completely happy. But that's a really interesting question. I don't know if my passion would have been the same. I got a feeling it probably would have been pretty close, but I don't think I would have been the player, and I may not have decided to go to university for it.
Right. And I think that's kind of the thing. Like we talk a lot in our ed class about like students that don't really come from a musical background, and sometimes it's hard to get them engaged with music, especially in high school or even elementary. But just because of kind of not really the rigor that's set out, but the fact that a lot of the curriculum and a lot of the ways that music pedagogy is still seen today is very like it's very tied to the elements and the academia of music, and it doesn't really connect with the way that students experience music outside of the classroom.
I think that's a really good point. And the other angle of it I see from a parent's point of view is when you're talking to parents or students tell you what their parents are telling them, and they look at your choices that you're making on your courses that you're taking in high school. There's a lot of students that get actively counseled out of taking music because the parents don't see much value in that. And
right.
That was never, ever questioned in my home. There was never a syllable spoken that way at all. And so, again, I feel very lucky. It was always a total green light, but I've talked to so many students that kind of supports your point, that their parents say, well, you can take it in grade 9, but that's all. Because they don't see a future in it. And for me personally, it was my future. I couldn't imagine being happier doing another line of work. I really don't see myself. I mean, I could do an office job, and it's not hard work, but man, it'd be pretty boring, and I wouldn't get much from it. But
yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting that you say that, because I've been kind of mulling over the same thing, really, and it's just, I think a lot of people just decide, well, or not a lot of people decide, but I think the thing is, if you actually cannot see, there's probably a ton of things that you could see yourself being able to do, but seeing yourself actually doing those things is something different. And for a lot of people, I think music is the one thing that they truly, the only thing that they really have, and the thing that they will really enjoy for the rest of their lives. And the same thing, they don't want to be stuck in some sort of office job.
Yeah, and one more angle to that. Do you remember a poster that was on the wall at the back of our music room here? It's no longer here because we've replaced it with the Wall of Fame, but you might have seen it in grade 9 or 10. It was a poster for Yamaha Instruments. but it had about, 20, 25 people all standing, and they were all from different walks of life. So there was
Oh,
like
yeah.
a doctor, a lawyer, an RCMP officer, like a whole
I do
raft
remember
of
that.
different occupations, but they were all holding musical instruments. And
Right,
the whole
right.
point of the poster was that it's a lifelong skill, that even if you do end up getting a job, to go back to my point about working in the office, I do also know lots of people that do have jobs that just pay the bills, and
Right.
they just do that. But man, when that clock goes at 5 o'clock, they might be playing in a band later on that night, and that's how they get their musical fix, and they just love it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that being said, like, what would you say kind of is your approach to students who take music because they feel like, oh, it's an easy credit, or oh, I didn't want to take drama, so I'm just doing this, and kind of the students that or even the students that thought that they would really enjoy music, and then they get into the classroom and they're kind of disengaged with what's going on. Like, how do you kind of try and cater to those students and accommodate them?
I think as long as you try to show them that we're trying to have as much fun as we can here, there's no getting around the fact that if you want to play a piece really well, you have to, or even to play it properly, you have to put some work into it.
Right.
And I think that's what you're talking about. You do see a lot of those kids. I try not to dwell on that too much, and I guess I'm always hopelessly optimistic that by the end of the course, maybe little Johnny realized that, you know what, it wasn't that hard to play that scale on the trumpet, and I actually kind of like it, and it's not a super heavy instrument, and maybe I'll think about taking it in for next year. I don't really change my approach with any of the students. You do kind of get a sense that there are some that you know are stronger than others or who will go on.
Right.
Like I knew that about you probably as early as grade 10. I wouldn't have thought that about you in the grade 9 beginning course.
Right.
But, you know, just it's the extracurricular involvement. That's usually a pretty clear indicator.
Right.
If somebody wants to, of their own volition, take part in a band, I think that says a lot about the student right there. So, and I know I didn't really accurately answer your question, but
no, it's fine.
I don't really try. I mean, yeah, I might try to work a little harder to say, if I sense that somebody's really unhappy, I'll say, well, you know what, we've only got 9 weeks left in the course. We only have 2 tests left to go. You're just going to have to try your best at this, and if I can make the test any easier for you, it might be maybe giving you a little alternate test to do just to get them on their way and get them the credit, knowing they're never going to come back and play music. Yeah, I do have those students, and you're grateful, I guess, for the time that you had them, but that's the one that got away, right? You just have to
you just
pick yourself up off the mat again and say, all right, well, I'm going to have 25 more come in the next semester, and hopefully there's fewer of those kinds of students. But nobody's ever told me flat out that they've taken it because the drama was full. And actually, I did have a kid in my grade 10 class this year who said he didn't really want to take music, but it was his only, and he ended up, I think, having a good time.
Yeah.
The drummer, and I think he was fine.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Oh crap! I had another question and I forgot what it was. I think
we can come back to that topic if I jog your memory about the students that are my approach to students that may not go on for.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. Do you feel like there's been kind of like an increase or a decrease in that attitude over time, or do you think that's kind of like school specific sort of problem where it kind of fluctuates between different high schools?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you have to take into account what kind of school this is. We are a science school. It is the tail that wags the dog here. And so you've got that. That's just the reality of it is. And maybe John F. Ross isn't the same way because they've got French immersion kids that are there that we don't get.
Right.
And French immersion kids often are the kind of kids that would take music. So yeah, I think the kind of school is definitely part of what contributes to the percentage of kids that end up being that way. But overall, I don't think I've seen a huge increase. I would say maybe a little bit of an increase with kids wanting to work a little bit less to become a better musician. I mean, it's the old joke if I look at Symphonic Winds and say, how many of you are practicing in between rehearsals? almost no hands would go up. I'd be naive if I expected them to be doing that. But I certainly nagged them about it. So I do pick up on that. I think the willingness to practice as much as you need to make the band sound good probably is diminishing percentage-wise.
Okay. Would you say that that's...
But not alarmingly so.
Okay, that's good. Would you say that that might be like somewhat contributed or attributed to the fact that like technologies and recording and sampling technologies, you can get like apps for your iPad and stuff like that, and it's just become kind of so easy to make music nowadays without playing an instrument that now they're saying that... Well,
that's interesting because now you're getting into a larger area about the existence of what we call the military band model. That's kind of what we run here. I remember a former VP who was here had that chat with me probably 5 years ago, saying, you have to look at the fact that this is what you're running here primarily, and that's not necessarily in 2017 what a lot of kids are hoping to get involved with when they get to high school. You're just going to give me a choice of wind instruments or percussion, and that's it.
Yeah.
So thankfully, and his point was well taken. Because now we offer electronic music when we ask kids to take it, and guitar. But I think that's part of it because to get back to the specifics of your question, if the kid that signs up really wants to play a wind instrument, I believe we should have every resource here for that person to get better at it.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that overall the numbers have been declining in recent years because kind of the technology of what you were saying. There are kids that can, you can get a GarageBand on your MacBook now, and you can make recordings and get together with your buddies, and you don't necessarily need to feed that hunger to learn more about music by taking a music course at high school necessarily. Right. And that's kind of a nail in our coffin when that happens. The other thing, too, is that, I don't know if you know this, but guidance and by extension high schools have been offering credits to students for grade 11 and grade 12 music, and they don't ever have to set foot in a music classroom. Do you know how they do that?
Is that an online course?
No, it's the Royal Conservatory.
Oh, okay, I see.
So if little Johnny's playing grade 8 piano and gets his exam and gets a high mark or whatever, that counts as a grade, I think it's a grade 11 or a grade 12 music credit.
Interesting.
And we have never been in support of that because we don't see those two things as being the same thing at all.
Right, yeah, band experience.
How does studying for a piano exam and then having one 20-minute performance possibly equate with 4 months in a classroom where you are getting daily playing and exposure to history and theory and the human contact, working as a team? I mean, I could go on. There's so many things that you get in a classroom that you don't get when you're playing a Mozart piece by yourself on a piano.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and that being said, is there anything about like the current curriculum that you would want to change or expand?
Well, I say this cautiously. I would love to see music protected the same way French is, but my fear of that is, like on the downside of that, you will get a higher percentage of those potential behavior problem kids who are taking the class because they have to. In the same way that French does now. I mean, you talk to French teachers and they'll tell you there's always a minority of kids who are bitter that they have to be there.
Right.
So, like, that comes with a big price, but in my heart and in my brain, I know that there are more benefits than there are problems associated with music education. And I would love to see it protected more, or maybe more realistically, I'd love to see the timetabling and staffing of music classes or arts classes by extension to be maybe a little more protected in terms of what principals assign for classes, because right now we're just like anybody else. If the principal doesn't see a certain number of bums in the seats, they just cancel the class. And I think arts programs are hugely significant to any school, no matter what, if you're a Centennial or a Ross or a College Heights. You've got to have an arts component there or some outlet, even if they're smaller classes. And so by that, I mean they should be protected, or maybe there should be a little bit more flexibility. The principals say, well, there's only 19 kids signed up in Daniel's grade 9 vocal class. I would like to see that course run instead of being chopped. But the problem is you're also sharing the building and sharing the job with a bunch of other teachers here who teach math and English and science, who never see any less than 30 kids in their class.
Right, right.
And so it's a workload issue. I get that. But they also, like, I would love to see 30 kids in my class because that's a sign of a healthy program. I wouldn't mind teaching more kids.
Exactly.
But I'd like that person to understand that, you know, in the big picture, I think you should allow me to run smaller classes. It sounds arrogant of me to say that, but I'm not saying it because I want to work less than they do. Plus, they're not coming in 3 mornings a week to do bands.
Yeah,
English teachers. I mean, so it all comes out in the wash. I mean, how are you going to slice that work up?
Yeah,
sure, they have a huge marking load, more than I do. But how many hours a week are they putting in outside of class time?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know?
And I think a lot of people kind of overlook that fact. Like they see the finished product of something musical, right? Like they don't really see all of the time and all of the sweat and the grit that goes into making something like that as good as it is when it's presented to any sort of audience. And the audience doesn't know what you had to go through in order to get it to that point. So,
some do.
But well, yeah, the ones, and it's usually the ones who are musicians themselves, right? And they kind of, or any sort of artist, right? And I think, I don't know, like especially at Centennial, I think the arts got very overlooked a lot of the time. And
it's getting better now. We have, because we're a whole arts department now, and there's a huge Spartans art showcase coming up in May, and the way we've done our grade 8 parents' nights now are much more arts focused than they used to be. So the tide is definitely turning.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Would you? Is that kind of? Do you think that's kind of like up to the principal, like how they decide?
No, that was from our department head, who is Miss Mulcahy. She's trying to push hard, of course, in collaboration with all of us, to just try to give arts more visibility.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So it's kind of like cheerleading, being proud of what you do, and not just kind of existing as this quiet department that makes artistic things. You like wear the T-shirt, wear the badge, you know, walk the walk, and try to, you know, say, hey, you should be doing this. And because every high school you're going to have a lot of talented artists. It's just the nature of what teenagers do. There's so much talent out there.
Do you think that school kind of or even the arts programs that we have in place, do you feel like it's enough of an outlet for these students to kind of to have their own musical or artistic or expressionistic ideas, but also not being able or not being afraid to like share those with the teacher or like classmates and stuff like that? Do you feel like that's kind of like that is allowed in the classroom and the arts programs that we have in place right now? Like
we're probably more rigid than we are flexible, and then probably a little bit more flexibility would be good. Like, do I need to cover the topics historically and theoretically that I do every year? If I understand your question correctly, maybe we could work in a unit that gives them a little bit more choice, a little bit a different means of expression. Maybe we could have a unit where they examine a particular kind of music that they really like and try to understand more about it, but we insist on using more accurate terminology rather than just saying, this band rocks. Sure, I've thought about that quite a lot. It's just really out of lack of inspiration more than anything, or a little bit lazy maybe. I could rewrite all of the courses that I teach and work in units like that are kind of break away from the norm. But I think also, that being said, there has to be a certain amount of routine in the course. I think every kid expects that they're going to get better at a certain thing by taking a course. But your question also addressed, is it enough of an outlet for the students? Yeah, Is I think we give them lots to do and lots to learn, but a lot of them, I probably see it more in the vocal class. I can't shake the feeling that there's a lot of kids in this class who are singing stuff that they think is okay, but it's not really close to their heart. And why can't we be singing more Taylor Swift, or why can't we be singing more this and that? Well, not all those kinds of music are great teaching tools, right? So,
Right.
I guess the easy answer is we could probably do a little bit more to let some students reach more expressions or more outlets of expression, but I think we give them lots.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Would you say that there's any students that you've come across that are not necessarily that you can tell that they're very engaged, but you can tell that they have some very interesting ideas and their own thoughts about playing, and they could be very skilled, but for some reason they don't seem to be like active participants or engaging in the class simply because they're shy or whatever the reason.
I always wonder that, and if I remember, I try to ask them if I get a sense of it. Sometimes I don't get told of it until it's a parents' night. Right. And one of the parents will say, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but Jane is really interested in music and would love to learn more. And, of course, Jane hasn't said 2 words in 2 months, so I didn't really know. So I think that is kind of a shortcoming on my part. I should probably be working harder to, review going through the class. All right, she didn't say much this week. Maybe I should say, is everything all right? Check in more often, I guess, is kind of a way that I would, and I'm probably not the best at checking in as often as I could. And I would hate to think that a kid went through a course without me knowing at all that they had a real secret desire to learn a whole lot more about music and were hugely disappointed. Right. That would make me feel legitimately sad that I missed that. So yeah. Quite often it's their words and their actions, 90% of the time, that let me know what their interest level is. And if they don't say anything or I don't get a sense from them, then I don't really pursue it.
Okay. Well, that's good. Do you feel like other students are they like accommodating to those kinds of students, or do you feel like they're a little bit isolated from the rest of the group sometimes?
Yes, I sometimes feel that there are kids that don't have the social, what's the right word? Social savvy. They don't feel comfortable. And actually, this kind of goes back to your previous question, too. If they don't naturally want to speak to other people, I don't necessarily get the idea that they're going to be very engaged in certain things. So it's quite often their social interaction that tips me off, that gives me clues. And if they don't ever interact with anybody, I sometimes will just want to come up to them and say, is everything all right, or anything I can help with, or are you happy? Because you want the kids to be having fun. And I'd be lying if I was saying that was the only thing. Of course, the fun part hopefully translates into you wanting to take the course again for next year, because I'm always selfishly hoping that I get enough kids to take music every year that I can continue to just teach music. I mean, that's a dream, right? And that's, I think, every teacher's dream, to be able to do what you do in your discipline. Because you probably know every teacher in Ontario has to have 2 areas of a teachable area, a major and a minor. And I had to do a lot of English in my early career because there wasn't enough music courses for me to teach.
Oh, interesting.
Probably the most English I taught was probably in the first 12 or 13 years of my career. And I've had to do probably 9 or 10 classes since I've been here at Centennial for 13 years. Sometimes there just aren't enough, so now they've got me doing careers, which is better. I mean, I love teaching English, but that was a roundabout way of saying, you want the kids to have fun so they can enjoy taking your course and hopefully want to take it again.
Especially in a music course too, right? Like that's kind of the whole point is that freedom of expression and being able to put your own thoughts and your own ideas out into the world without.
I think the social interaction is different in the music room than it is in the English classroom. It's probably closer to something like phys ed or drama, where you're actually doing something practical.
Right.
And physically and verbally interacting with students in activities, where opposed to English, where you come and sit down and kind of do your own thing, unless it's a group activity, right?
Right. Do you think that's kind of an individualistic thing, whether people want to be working in like on something practical with a group of people, or is that just kind of a human nature thing, like everyone kind of wants to be a part of a group working on something together? Because I know a lot
I would say most people, maybe not most, but there's a lot of students that would rather not work in groups.
Okay, yeah.
I get a strong sense of that, so because I can see it when I assign something that's in a group. I can see I can just see the expression on their faces, right? Some of them are disappointed because they don't necessarily feel that comfortable. Maybe they don't know a lot of people in the class, and I've got to do this. And
yeah, would you say that's kind of would that be more the students who were already kind of less engaged with the class before, or have there been students that?
Yes, probably so. Probably so.
Because I guess those are kind of the students that don't know as many people in the classroom usually, just because everyone else is active in the program, right? And they all kind of know each other just by...
We don't see that much down here because of Music Council and because of the extracurriculars. Kids know each other.
That's good. That's good.
Unless the kid's coming in from another country that has had no history with the group. But even still, at this school anyway, the music kids are super nice to them. And it doesn't take long for that person to be totally welcomed into the fold.
Right, and that's. Do you think that's kind of that happens with all music programs, or is that kind of the way that you've taught your students?
I think it probably happens more with a group of music. Like if you were to gauge, take person X, and they're brand new to a school, and they are going to spend a semester in a music class and a semester in an English class, I think they will find acceptance and some sort of interactions happening far earlier in a music class. Just because music tends to attract kind of a nerdier, nicer kid. Not always so much edginess or keeping to themselves. You can't really have a room full of introverts in a music class. It just doesn't really work.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
You know, and I think that's the case. It doesn't matter what school you're at. Music kids tend to be nicer kids. And I'm not saying that all the other disciplines aren't nice.
No.
I'm just saying as a social experiment, you could, keep track of a kid or keep track, and I think they'll always find happiness and success in a music classroom.
Interesting. Well, going back to what you said about extroversion and introversion, do you feel like more extroverted kids are more attracted to music, or?
Yes, and they sometimes can take over a class. You have to be able to harness that. But I've also seen very introverted kids that for the first 2 weeks don't speak very much, and all of a sudden people are opening up to them and saying, "Hey, Rosie, nice to see you again," and they smile more often, and that person goes from being less introverted to more extroverted.
Within that setting.
Yeah.
Right.
I see that all the time.
Well, that's really good, and I think a lot of that comes from the way that you run your classes and your bands, just very like warm and welcoming. And if something's not 100%, like of course you'll be the first to say that, okay, well that was good, but like we can do it better next time, kind of thing. But there's never any fear, and there's never any like intimidation in the classroom, especially. I mean I can only really speak from my experience, but like even now, like I have band directors who will yell in your face if something's not right, but like at a certain point, I mean, being a university student, you kind of need that sometimes, and I think a lot of the fear factor is kind of worn off just because I've been here for almost a year. But it's very interesting to go from one ensemble to another, or one conductor to another, and just see how differently they run their bands, right? And I think for a lot of students, especially at the high school level, I think what you're doing is very, very inviting and very welcoming, and that
I appreciate you saying that. I really have to work on being the same with every student. You might not see that, but I've heard that criticism leveled against me, is that I tend to play favorites, and if you've got a student that doesn't smile ever and doesn't talk ever, and they put their hand up and ask a question, I need to be sure that I am responding the exact same way to that kid as I am to one of my flute players who's very outgoing and gregarious and laughing all the time and joking around with me. And that's hard for me to do sometimes because I can't shake that feeling sometimes. Like, why does that person never want to talk? And if they play a wrong note, I want to make sure that I draw it out and say it in as nice a way as I would say it to anybody. And so I do feel I've got some work to do in that respect.
Well, but that's a very human thing, right? Like you just can't really shake your impressions of someone, no matter how hard you try to remain neutral about any kind of situation. But no, I think that's very admirable that you're aware of that and that you are continuously working on that. And that's the thing that we kind of talk about in our pedagogy course, is that it's not so much about being the perfect teacher. It's more about kind of knowing where your weaknesses are, or knowing when something's not working, and knowing when to change that and how to change that.
Yes, and I always go back to something that they told me in Teachers College, is that one of the things you have to do is you have to be, and this is a terrible comparison to use this, but the way that they phrased it was, you got to start off your course like Hitler and end up being really nice.
Right.
Because if you start off your course being really nice, it doesn't work the other way. You can't all of a sudden become meaner and more strict, because the students will have a harder time understanding that. But if you go in there very firm at the beginning, and you don't have to be like Hitler, obviously, but just, not showing your fun side very much, and you get people kind of into that rhythm, then you can relax the grip a little bit. And I must say that I've never really been successful with that old adage, because I can't be that way. It's not my nature to be mean and strict and very regimented, and I'm also not very organized. I'm also a skill I'm trying to work on. So sometimes that can be a problem, because you let yourself go to being so nice at the beginning of the course that sometimes you get students taking advantage of that and hijacking the class a little bit.
Right.
And you end up, having to change your schedule sometimes. And so that's kind of something I could, not being afraid to stay a little bit more firm right from the word go and have a clear path and a clear plan. I think students appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Do you, would you say that you kind of teach music in sort of a more like a perennial style of teaching, where kind of the teacher is the teacher and is learning a student about a certain topic? Because another thing that we've kind of we're playing around with the idea of teaching not as a teacher, but more as like a facilitator for creativity and just kind of more like guiding students towards ideas and goals and discoveries, rather than just giving it to them in black and white. Like, what is there anything? Sorry,
I can see myself doing both. I think I have to follow certain things in the curriculum, and I don't ever waver from that. I mean, and the kids will whine about it. They say, well, why do we have to do triads, or why do we have to do chord progressions?
Yeah.
Well, you have to, and they eventually buy into it. But I also think that there's a lot of facilitating going on, and you accommodate all the time, and that's why I want to look at everybody's solo that they're going to do for me to make sure that solo fits that person.
Right.
And I think in that role, you are being a facilitator. You are making sure that a student doesn't pick something that's either way below their level or way above their level, because they think they have to do something impressive. And it kind of gets back to that earlier conversation we had about maybe redesigning certain units of the course to give them more outlets of expression. In both of those cases, I think you are being a facilitator for sure.
Yeah.
Because they know that they're going to have some playing tests. They know they're going to have to do some of this and that for the course. And how can I help guide you? And there's also the personal issues that they're going through as well. I have to say, I think that's one of my strengths. There's a much higher level of anxiety in students these days than there ever was when I was a student.
Mm.
And so I try to be more sensitive to that. And if I get a sense that somebody is going through a tough time, I would never, ever expect them to do a test for me when they're
Right.
feeling upset about something. So I think that's part of a facilitator's job too, to make sure that you are hearing that students still do the test, but maybe they need a couple of extra days because
Right.
their mom and dad are splitting up and they're going through a tough time.
Yeah.
But that's not unique to music for sure. Every teacher in the province goes through that, and I would like to think that they're all open and sensitive to that and allowing the students to do that. But yeah, I often use that word facilitator in my mind. That's what we do, I think, more than just straight
More than
teaching.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, is it kind of the same in your English teaching experience? Like kids with personal problems, kind of, is it easier? Is it harder to tell? Or is it harder for them to tell you, like?
Yeah, I think they're probably less inclined to open up in the English classroom. Although that being said, sometimes things come out in written journals and responses, right? That they're going through kind of something. But I don't know that I just think it's different. I think every kid's going to have their own comfort level of when they want to discuss something like that. Some kids will never want to discuss that with any of their teachers ever.
Yeah.
They prefer to deal with it. And others just can't help themselves and they're in tears and you have to say, hey, what's going on? And then, yeah. And we try to get updates from the admin and the other teachers when there's something serious going on so that we know not to push a kid too much.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and I think that's one of the toughest things about teaching, because if you don't know, right, and then something happens or a kid just kind of breaks down and shuts down, like, of course you're going to feel bad about it, but that's the thing, like you can't really prepare for something that you don't know. And
right. And to go back to that thing I was saying about being a Hitler first, can you imagine if someone who's on the edge of something huge going on, and they come into my class, and I'm going, all right, get your pens out, do this and that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that kid's never going to open up to me. So I think I tend to be so nice that the kids, if they're going through a tough time, they don't have any problems telling me that and asking for one extra day, and that's, I think that has to be part of our job.
Right.
To support kids as much as we can.
Well, that's really awesome. Okay, well, that's kind of all my things for now. I guess if I have anything else that I think of, we can sort out another time maybe. But
okay.
Yeah, no,
well, I'm glad we were able to cover the questions that you asked, and I'm glad I was able to help out. I would love to hear a copy of this and maybe some of your other ones with your students too at some point. Hopefully I can go onto your website and check them out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, as soon as the website's back up and running, like it's weird. Like I can get on my website if I don't go through like the development part, like actually log in and to change things on my website. So I can send you a link once I put everything up there, and
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, you can check it out. See what you think. There's a couple videos, and there's annotations on readings that we've done and stuff like that. Some of the readings are actually really cool. They're just kind of articles about music pedagogy in general, and how it's kind of shifting and new and emerging ideas about the music classroom and its setting and stuff like that. But
well, that's again, that's why I'm saying I would like to, because I was very intrigued by your comment about facilitating, and I would like to find out what the current pedagogical ideas are that you're experiencing, because I remember getting told at Teachers College, you never ever lecture at teenagers for any more than 8 minutes. That was back in 1992. That was the thinking, that the attention span of a teenager is only about 8 minutes. So you are a fool if you think you can talk to a group of teenagers for any longer than 8 minutes. That was kind of the thinking back then. So I'd be curious to see what the thinking is now.
Do you feel like that holds true in some ways?
Well, it depends on the word lecture. I mean, I came from a high school where all the grade 13 classes were done in lecture format, and I hung in there for well past 8 minutes, so I don't know what they're talking about. But I would never just sit and talk at a class in one extended go anyway. I mean, unless it was kind of a super personal kind of a conversation where I'm sharing with them maybe what happened last night. I think you could engage a class for a whole hour if the person was engaging enough.
Right.
So
right.
It depends on what it is you're trying to engage them with. If you're going to make it come across like a lecture, yeah, you might lose a lot of them after a little while.
Yeah. Do you think that the school system kind of like not diminishes but kind of underestimates what students are capable of handling and capable of learning, especially at kind of like the elementary school level? Like, is there kind of not a divide, but just kind of this idea that, you know, if you're in grade 5, then there's no possible way that you could ever learn something that you would learn in a grade 9 classroom simply because it's just too advanced. Like,
yeah, there's definitely that kind of rigidity built into the structure. But I'd also like to think that if somebody was discovered to have a super high IQ in that grade 5 class, that person would be accelerated along.
Mm-hmm.
To try to give them what their natural God-given abilities are. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but they do tend to be pretty rigid in how they construct the curriculums at various grade levels. I mean, the whole thing could do with an overhaul. I mean, it's a topic that I think everybody should have a part in, whether you have kids or not. I mean, because we all went through it. I mean, in the first 18 years of your life, 13 years of those 18 years, you are in institutionalized socialization in the realm of education, where you are herded into different rooms according to different timetables and different ability levels, and then you're supposed to follow this path and do everything that everybody tells you to do for 13 years. And I don't know that necessarily works for everybody. So there's always going to be people that, you know, and maybe we need to rethink the whole structure. Maybe, you know, because there's other systems out there, the Waldorf school, the Montessori school. There's other alternatives. They cost a lot more. But, yeah, and then you look at other education systems around the world, Sweden, Finland, you know, Israel. I don't think they all have the same thing where you have to go 13 years. Germany, I know much earlier, I think grade 8 or 9, they get choices that are much more tied to work, like they're courses that are almost like co-op experiences. And from that early age, and some kids end up going into that as a full-time career. So, yeah, this is a very unique system we have, and I think it's a good topic for discussion that we should all talk about it and say, is this working for everybody? I mean, homeschooling is big now, right? Some people are saying, I don't like what's going on in public schools, and I'm not going to let my kid go there.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because I feel like I kind of felt like going through elementary and high school, and then like you work and you get taught for 13 years, and every single decision you've ever made has basically been made for you, right? And then all of a sudden, the end of grade 12, and they're like, okay, now what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And you're like, wait, what? You don't, like, you're not kind of, they kind of put this huge question on your shoulders, and it's just kind of all on you after that. And I think that's not really the best.
The careers course is helping with that. The careers course is actually pretty well designed now.
Oh, okay.
And if I had had a careers course as a high school student, well, maybe not for me personally, but I know a lot of people would have probably got more out of it, because a lot of people, just as you say, were lost after high school. I had no idea what they were going to do.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the education system in general is a bit of a bigger topic, and could probably reserve that for another day. But
and that's why I'd like to see what that kind of stuff that you're doing. So yeah, whenever you can get that link up, that'd be great. I'd love to check it out.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, it was really nice talking to you, and
really great talking to you, Marshall. And good luck with this. And I would love to get in touch again soon.
Yeah, for sure. All right. You have a good one. And
all right. Thank
I
you,
will
Marshall.
send you this when it's done.
Appreciate that.
Cool. See you later.
Bye. All right.